Fantastic. Listen, great. So we're going to talk about RIA, broker-dealer, and other financial service and banking issues. And Mike Berwick's going to be leading that discussion. So, Michael? Thanks, Marty. I really enjoyed the last panel very much, and I was concerned a little bit at the end that Gary's going to be issuing grades for the other panels today as well. So hopefully that's not going to happen. We are, as everybody I think has discussed today, in a time of great uncertainty and great tumult and really unstable markets. And with all of that up and down and back and forth comes threats from customers, comes threats from regulators and so forth. And I am here to talk with my two colleagues, or two of my colleagues, Chad Weaver and Kirsten Patzer, about some of these challenges. And I think since I introduced myself at the outset this morning, I'm gonna just throw to first, I guess we'll go ladies first and go with Kirsten and then Chad, just to introduce themselves, let the attendees know who they are and what they do here at Freeman, Mathis, and Gary. So Kirsten.
Hi, thanks, Michael. Hi, everyone. My name's Kirsten Patzer. I'm actually a fairly new partner here at Freeman, Mathis, and Gary. I've spent the bulk of my career in-house. I was previously at Raymond James, LPL Financial, and Fidelity Investments. I am heading up the financial services litigation team here on the East Coast, and hopefully you will find the little talk that we've prepared informative and helpful.
Great, thanks, Chad.
Hello, everyone. Chad Weaver here on the West Coast. I chair the firm's national financial practice, which consists of both compliance consultants as well as litigators like myself. Been litigating broker-dealer, RIA, advisor cases for the past 20 years, whether those cases are in arbitration, FINRA, state court, federal court, across the country. So I have seen a lot of cases involving situations of market declines, investment losses, and so forth.
Thanks, Chad. Kirsten, I will turn to you for the first question.
Oh. We'll see how long he realizes it takes that he's been muted and no longer has a video.
There he is.
There we are.
Am I live again?
You're live again.
Okay. I know you can hear me, but you can see me as well?
Yeah, well, I couldn't hear you either. So you were a complete blackout, but go ahead.
That might actually be the high point of my presentation. First question, Kirsten, is for you. During this time of COVID-19, the upcoming election, and the other national crises, there's been a lot of change in the financial services arena. With all of these new dynamics and all of these changes, many registered persons have moved or are considering moving to new firms. Kirsten, can you discuss the litigation potential and the litigation consequences of these transitions in the context of the investment advisory business and otherwise, as you please?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we've seen over the past decade is a move more towards the independent side of the brokerage world. Most people, the wirehouses are no longer the big dogs on the block. We've got large independent BDs, and the space that's really opening up is the RIA space, where advisors are going out on their own, even further removed from being regulated by FINRA and having a large BD behind them, and instead deciding to go the truly independent route. And I think you're going to see more of that, especially in the age of COVID, where like Charles Schwab is 95% remote. Fidelity is 90% remote. Raymond James is about 95% remote. And all these advisors are sitting there thinking, why am I paying these big broker dealers part of my hard-earned cash when I could just go out and be more independent? The problem is if they don't do it carefully, and especially if they're coming from one of the big wirehouses that are no longer part of the protocol, like Morgan Stanley, UBS, Citi, those, and I know for a fact, those three will definitely go after you and sue you if you don't have all your ducks in a row, that you don't follow the rules with regards to customer information that you can and cannot retrain, and they will sue you for your book of business. And that can have economic and regulatory issues as well. So moving from either a wirehouse or even from RIA to RIA, because if you're the protocol is not just limited to broker dealers. While there's only currently, I believe, around 1,900 signatories, RIAs can be a signatory to the protocol, but there's currently, I think there's 16,000 registered investment advisors that are regulated through the SEC, and this is not even counting ones that are small enough and only hit the threshold to be regulated by their state. So probably double that, and with only 1,900 being a member of the protocol, that's a way you can protect yourself from moving from one RIA that's a protocol firm to another one that's a protocol firm, which allows you to bring more information over.
Thank you. Turning to Chad. Chad, what are you seeing in the broker-dealer world from a litigation and/or an enforcement perspective relative to COVID, business continuity, branch audits, the relatively new regulation BI, and how do you and your team, which I'm a part of here, and Kirsten is as well, at FMG, work with member firms that are confronted or faced with oversight by FINRA?
Sure. So while lockdown has definitely taken its toll on broker dealers and investment firms and so forth, the regulators have not stopped. They are continuing to proceed with enforcement actions, inquiries, investigations, and so forth. That's something that we do, that I do, representing advisors, individuals, firms, or whatnot, with investigations, enforcement actions, and so forth. And certainly that's still continuing. Those usually have, relate to events and transactions that occurred years ago, but they certainly haven't stopped pace in any regard. With respect to the most recent COVID situation, issues that we are consulting firms with certainly include Reg BI, the new regulation of best interest rule that was implemented. And we saw, well, I thought, at least in March, when all these lockdowns occurred, that maybe the SEC would pause on their compliance deadline for Reg BI, but we saw that they did not. They had their deadline at June 30th, and they insisted that firms comply by that deadline. And hopefully most firms did just that. We helped firms with their Form CRS and compliance with Reg BI. And now we're just continuing to work with them just on what this means going forward in terms of, and now we have a new standard of care, and what does that mean for purposes of just dealing with our clients and all the various situations that they have to deal with them. Business continuity plans certainly were put to a test. Broker dealers, that are located in, hurricane situations like Florida have probably been put to the test. Their continuity plans almost yearly. But I think what COVID woke up were the broker dealers and firms across the country to say, what plans do you have in place for situations where you have a lockdown, where where you have to go remote and so forth. So hopefully firms kind of learn their lessons. We are helping firms kind of implement new procedures and so forth in the event there's a second shutdown, lockdown. And I guess my word to the group, to those that have business continuity plans or do not, is be careful, because I think the regulators may give firms a maybe a chance, the first go around, but second go around, I think there's a higher expectation that firms are going to not only have them, but implement them appropriately. So I think, if there is a second wave, and hopefully there's not, or a second lockdown of any sort, hopefully firms are ready to deal with those. So anyway, those are the top issues that we're seeing right now, but who knows what's in store through this volatile market.
And Chad, that's not, I mean, I've been seeing this a lot on the RIA side with the SEC. Their focus is definitely on business continuity as part of Rule 206 in the Advisors Act, that requires firms or RIAs to revisit their policies and procedures every year and have policies and procedures that are there in place to protect their end customer. And that's exactly what business continuity is all about. And I think a lot of times firms don't understand that this is not just about having some policy on a piece of paper. It actually needs to work so there is no customer harm down the road.
Yeah, certainly. The easiest layup for a regulator that comes in an enforcement case is to pull up your written supervisory procedures and say, look, your procedure on this says you're going to do X, Y, and Z. Show me where you did X, Y, and Z. And if you're not putting those into place, then they have you on, you didn't even follow your own procedures. So not only do you have to have the procedures, but you actually have to be set up so you can actually put them in place if something like that warrants, implementation of a certain procedure.
And I suspect with everything that's going on right now, a lot of those policies and procedures, really across the board, almost in a force majeure sense, are going to be modified, amended, updated, et cetera, knowing that, where this is the new reality or the new normal going forward.
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, I've seen a lot of firms, there's a lot of, these RIA in a box, not to disparage them as a company, but there are these outfits that put together procedures for RIAs in a very boilerplate fashion. And it's not bad, it's a good start. The problem is when it's boilerplate and it's not tailored to your specific business model, it can be problematic from a regulatory point of view. Because if you're not actually implementing the procedures that you've put in place, the regulators are going to have a field day with you.
No, absolutely. And that's all from an enforcement, standpoint. What I'd like to cover with both of you with respect to broker dealers and registered investment advisors has to do really with litigation, arbitrations, et cetera. Both, it's too soon probably right now to say, what's new on, what's being filed currently, but with all the missed opportunities perhaps to catch a market on the rise or, selling at the wrong point, anybody that either loses money or doesn't make the profit that they were anticipating, many of those investors lawyer up and bring an action against their advisor. And I wonder if each of you could talk about, from the investment advisory perspective as well as from the broker dealer perspective, sort of what you anticipate will flow forward from this period in time, and also from an administrative sort of standpoint. I know that there's a huge backlog of arbitrations, and a lot of stuff that is being handled online or remotely. And I wonder and I'd love to hear each of your opinions on this, if you think that may very well be, the new normal, even past the time when COVID itself may be on the wane. Are we going to be doing more of this stuff remotely, or is it going to go back to being in person? And, what are these cases going to look like?
What's sort of funny is ever since the pandemic began, I was always joking that I was made to lawyer during a pandemic, because having done FINRA arbitration all of my life, the bulk of my job is done remotely. I often would not meet my client until a couple days before a hearing in person, or if we mediated the case the time before. We practice our motions telephonically. Everything is handled from a remote basis. So I think the biggest change, obviously, is the hearing, and it's been very hit or miss. I think you're going to see, while already so many cases settle to begin with, I think we're going to see a higher percentage of settlement rate because both sides, both claimants, attorneys, and the defense bar, we're all very hesitant to do these Zoom conferences because we already have problems with arbitrators paying attention when we're in the room together. And now add the technology piece and expecting them to be focused in this new medium, I think is increasingly difficult. So yeah, I think we have there's going to be, I think, and I know Chad has had some success with some mediations, and we think that might be definitely the new normal from a cost perspective for our clients.
Yeah, everything certainly is taking over remote. Mediations now are, for the most part, all remote, and there doesn't seem to be any significant impact on a settlement or whether a mediation is successful or not. The big test is going to be whether trial attorneys like ourselves actually proceed through a remote trial. In the courts, I think the judges are somewhat reluctant unless there's some real reason to have a hearing or trial sooner than later to actually impose and insist upon a remote proceeding. However, we're seeing in FINRA arbitrations more and more arbitration panels actually ordering the parties to just proceed. So it's certainly a different way of litigating, but like you said, we just kind of adapt and do this remote, and it'll be interesting to see how those actually go forward. I know there's been some challenges. I saw one of the hearings where one of the arbitrators was getting up and leaving and not really paying attention, so you can only imagine the host of challenges that litigators that practice in this area are going to face when their jury or arbitrators are just listening or watching a screen.
We've got a bunch of questions.
I was going to handle the one from Rob with if there is a change in the White House in November. I think everyone's probably big concern is if the fiduciary standard is going to rear its ugly head again. And I think there is a chance that that's going to happen, but I think we've just started with Reg BI. I'm not sure anyone has the appetite to go through such a new regulatory change again. Although here, I think what we do have to be more concerned about is like here in Massachusetts, where we now do have the fiduciary standard across the board. What are the individual states going to do, and how is that going to impact everyone, people who are registered in multiple states? And it's just going to cause sort of a regulatory free-for-all, quite frankly. But I don't see any major policy changes, even with a Biden-Harris administration.
So
I don't think fiduciary standards going to do that.
I'm going to disagree with my dear friend and partner in that I feel that there's such a groundswell of antipathy towards the industry from so many of the Biden supporters, including our own Senator Elizabeth Warren and others, that I feel like they look at the current regime and say this is a good first step, but what else can we do to protect investors? And I think that rightly or wrongly, and certainly it would be great for our business, because the more strict the regulatory regime is, probably the more entities are going to get in trouble, come looking to us for help. But I feel like there's definitely a nucleus or a core group there that feels like we just got started and we did what we could do under the last administration, but under President Biden, we're gonna do everything that we can to make sure that investors have the benefit of the doubt, short of promising them a certain return on their investments. But
well, Michael, we may have to have a bet on this then.
We could do that offline. I don't know. I don't know if you want to jump to the second question or Chad wants to jump in, but either way.
Yeah, regulatory environment, is there regulatory, is it needed in the case of scale, number one, or be compliant, to be able to afford to be compliant?
So, yeah,
That first one.
sure.
And maybe something more sense. The relaxation below, let's say, with like regulated or something like that. Does that value being one of the broker dealer chain? Now there's all these binders out there doing regulated deals. Is that value?
But great questions, both. I'll spend 10 seconds and just say that, in my former life as a chief compliance officer, one of the mantras that we always put forth as a small to medium-sized firm was the guidance from FINRA that you need to certain minimum threshold qualifications, but beyond that, the scope of the compliance regime is somewhat dependent on the resources that are available to the firm. You can't slide beneath an unacceptable level, but larger firms with more money are charged with probably having more sophisticated and more sophisticated regimes, more personnel, et cetera.
Michael, I don't want to interrupt you, but what question are you answering? Because we couldn't hear.
The first question about the scope and how the scope manifests itself in the compliance regime, but I'd love to hear from you guys and also on Reg A and so forth.
Is that to me? As far as, if you're talking about claims going forward, I think right now we just need to watch the dust settle to see what comes out of COVID, particularly the crash in March. We have seen this V recovery for the most part, but I'm sure there are many claims out there or potential claims that are still festering right now, whether talking to claimants' attorneys or other attorneys to figure out whether they want to pursue it or not. But I think there's certainly going to be a litany of cases, and we're going to potentially see for the first time an implementation of the Reg BI standard in those new cases, and what that means, for the arbitrators. Is this a higher standard of care? Did it require more of the advisors when they were dealing with their customers during this crash? What did he or she do or not do? And, obviously these cases are all tried in hindsight. So we always kind of start, somewhat with a, behind the eight ball, as they say. But right now, I can't say, what those cases are going to look like. I think we're going to still continue to defend the alternative investments, which I know some of which were kind of, limping along, and then they got hit by COVID. And I'm particularly talking about REITs. I imagine that we're going to see, difficult performance of those going forward, and those cases are going to continue to be filed as well. So time will tell.
I also suspect we're going to see some litigation involving more advisors as bad actors, with the separation, with less in-person audits, with the supervisory regime a little bit more removed. Advisors are going to potentially get up to more monkey business, and you could see more selling away, unauthorized private placements was just selling away, and that's going to definitely lead to more litigation. And what's terrifying about that, especially if it's in an RIA setting, is that so many RIAs don't have the E&O insurance and those sort of backdrop safety nets that protect them that so many BDs have. So if they have an RIA, it's a large RIA, but they don't have proper E&O coverage and they have a rogue actor, they could be left holding the bag, and that could be a very, very expensive proposition.
No question. I think also to add to that list, Kirsten, because things have been slower than normal, and I understand there's been a big recovery and everything else, but during the leaner times, you might have also on the BD setting, unauthorized, unpermitted outside business activities where where registered individuals are trying to do what they can to put additional income on the table and so forth. And to Chad's point, certainly with regard to alternative investments that have a basis in real estate, especially as was discussed really throughout the day with regard to asset classes, if it's hospitality or multifamily or what have you, or certainly office. I ignored the biggest one of all, and nobody's paying their rent. And that's the underlying income stream for securities. I think you're right. Certainly, Chad, your point is well taken. That there's likely to be significant litigation that comes down the road, and
Yeah,
I think
so
the
my
ability.
parting advice to the audience is to document, because having tried these cases for 20 plus years, when I get a case, the strong cases are the ones where the advisor documented the meetings and conversations with the client, because too often we see these he said, she said cases, and unfortunately, when you're up against the sympathetic retiree, sometimes it's a difficult start. So anyway, don't forget to document.
That's a great point. Great point.
And follow your policies and procedures.
That's it. Don't give them too many great ideas.
Oh, yeah,
Otherwise,
that's
we
true.
won't have any business. So just keep it limited to a couple of good salient points so that, not everybody doesn't know every rule of the road. So, all right, Marty, I'll flip back to you. Chad, Kirsten, thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you guys. Thank you for having us.